On behalf of the National Park Service, I'd like to welcome you to National Mall and Memorial Parks, home to the country's most famous monuments and memorials, and to the reopening of the Washington Monument, which was built to honor the military service of George Washington and the ideals of the nation he helped found. We in the National Park Service know well that this monument is one of our country's greatest treasures, a priceless gift passed from generation to generation. It is very gratifying to see so many of you here today who feel the same way. We are honored to have on the stage with us today Mr. John Podesta, Counselor to the President, Sally Jewell, Secretary of the Interior, John Jarvis, Director of the National Park Service, Caroline Cunningham, President of the Trust for the National Mall, David Rubenstein, philanthropist and founder and CEO of the Carlyle Group, Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, and Vincent Gray, Mayor of the District of Columbia, and Mike Boots, Acting Chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Thank you all for being here. Today, we again welcome visitors to this iconic symbol in the nation's capital, after it having been closed since August 2011, when it was damaged by an earthquake. National Mall and Memorial Parks is proud to serve as caretaker of this historic structure by both preserving the building and helping visitors better understand its significance. And we are thrilled to be able to once again open its doors. It's been a really long road since the earthquake in 2011. The monument's restoration and reopening is especially significant to me because I had only been superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks for a couple of weeks before the earthquake hit. And I have to admit, it was something of a trial by fire and kind of a big challenge. So its completion and reopening is not only a source of pride for me, but an enormous relief. But the reopening of the Washington Monument means so much more than that. It reaffirms our very democracy and the ideals of George Washington. The words of Senator Robert Winthrop during the dedication of the monument on February 21st, 1885, couldn't have been more prescient. In describing the monument, he said, "The lightnings of heaven may scar and blacken it. An earthquake may shake its foundations. But the character which it commemorates and illustrates is secure." He was right about the building and right about what it symbolizes. There are so many people to thank for their help in reaching this milestone. It is because of our partnership with the Trust and David Rubenstein's incredibly generous donation that the monument will continue to serve as a symbol of our democracy for generations to come. As we approach the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, it is more evident than ever that America's best idea will only be sustained by public-private partnerships like the one we have with the Trust and the generosity and support of private citizens. And of course, I'd like to recognize the public part of the public-private partnership, Congress. They acted very quickly to get the Park Service the funds we needed to get moving on the repair. And I'd also like to thank the incredible staff of the National Mall and Memorial Park who worked tirelessly for the last several years to help to get this monument open, and the wonderful support of our Denver Service Center of the National Park Service for their incredible support in the project. I'd also like to thank Outerbridge Horsey and James Symington of the Washington National Monument Society, who have continued the tradition of support for the monument started in the 1800s. And I'd very much like to offer my personal thanks to Secretary Jewell and to Director Jarvis and Regional Director Steve Weitzel for their support through the process of getting the monument reopened. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our Master of Ceremonies for today's event, who has taken time out of his busy schedule to be with us today. Please welcome television personality, actor, and author, Al Roker.
Well, thank you very much. Wow, personality. My kids would argue that, but it is a thrill to be here this morning on this historic day as we reopen the Washington Monument, especially because the weather is nice. If it had been a little on the lousy side, I might have begged off. But I got to tell you, I had the privilege of getting a sneak peek a week ago, and I can tell you it has been worth the wait. Now, the Washington Monument doesn't just memorialize America's first president. It's actually borne witness to some of the greatest trials our country has faced and overcome. It is literally a history lesson in marble that reveals its story as the colors change 1/3 of the way up. It's a testament to what can be accomplished when public and private resources and talent can be brought to bear. This morning we're going to learn a lot more about this iconic American monument through the words of our distinguished speakers and through music that celebrates our country's heritage. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge some very special guests in the audience today. Joining us are members of the military who have been injured during their service. To our wounded warriors and their family members, we want to thank you for your service. Your bravery and patriotism mirror that of our first Commander-in-Chief, George Washington. And now, will everyone please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the playing of the National Anthem by the U.S. Navy Ceremonial Band, and the retirement of the colors. Thank you to the Armed Forces Color Guard and the U.S. Navy Ceremonial Band. Thank you so much. Noting that earlier this is a historic event, the Washington Monument's only been closed a handful of times in the nearly 130 years since it's opened to the public back in 1888. Understanding the Washington Monument only adds to a visitor's appreciation of its significance. So to help us with a history lesson, we turn to the fourth graders in Mrs. Norris's class at Aiton Elementary School here in Washington, D.C. Little history on Aiton. This elementary school, which is located in Northeast D.C., is focused on academics, but also on turning out well-rounded students intellectually, socially, morally, and emotionally. We're grateful to Suzette Huggins, the principal of Aiton Elementary, who is here, and Mrs. Norris and her students for being here with us today. I have no doubt we are going to learn a lot from this bright group of students. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all yours.
We are so glad that the Washington Monument is fixed.
Now we will be able to go and see the view of our city.
Named for the man who thought this should be the nation's capital, George Washington, the father of our country, even though he had no children. I wonder what Washington would think of his monument.
Would he like the obelisk design a symbol of immortality? Would he like that people come from all over the world to visit and admire the tallest freestanding stone structure?
Would he like that people come from all over the world to visit? Would he like the 50 flags flying all around the monument to honor all the states in the country?
Would he like the historic commemorative stones on the inside walls that were donated by all the states in different groups?
A lot of work went into building this monument, starting on a cornerstone laying on July 4th, 1848.
But the money ran out, and they had to stop working, where the monument was 152 feet tall.
That is why the color changed part of the way up.
Stone was used to finish the monument from a different quarry, so the colors a little different.
They dedicated the monument in February 1885.
People went to the top in a steam-powered elevator, or they could take the almost 900 steps.
Today, visitors to the top will see the new exhibits that will help them learn more about the monument and its history. Washington was a tough general who fought hard to lead his army in a fight for independence. He will be glad that his monument stood strong during the earthquake.
He will be glad that so many people are here today to celebrate its reopening. Washington wished that he had gone to school more, so that he will be glad that we are learning about this monument and our national parks.
We are so glad to be here today and look forward to coming back again.
Another round of applause for the Aiton School, Mrs. Norris's class. Our next speaker is somebody I just met very recently. I actually met him twice. Once met him during President Clinton's administration when we talked about climate change. And then I met him just last week again during President Obama's climate change when they released the National Climate Assessment. John Podesta is a person who cares about our climate, cares about our environment, and cares about our national parks. Ladies and gentlemen, the White House Counsel, Mr. John Podesta.
Good morning. And on behalf of President Obama, I want to welcome you all. As Al was giving me that introduction, Secretary Jewell leaned over to me and said, "It's been 15 years and you haven't fixed it yet." So we're trying. But I want to welcome you on this beautiful morning I want to thank the kids from Aiton Elementary School. They were fantastic. We're here, of course, to celebrate the reopening of one of our nation's iconic monuments, the linchpin of the National Mall, the defining feature of the Washington skyline. This beautiful and seamless restoration shows us that the ideals that led our forefathers to build this monument and to found the National Park Service are as relevant and as important today as they were back in the 19th century. I'm proud to say my very first job in government was with the National Park Service, digging fence post holes on an historic farm in Northern Virginia. So unlike a lot of political figures, I don't go around claiming I was born in a log cabin, but I did build one for the National Park Service. From Acadia to Yellowstone, from presidential birthplaces to this very monument, our nation's parks and monuments hold in trust for our children and our children's children, those places that are central to understanding of America. Wallace Stegner referred to our parks and wild places as part of the geography of hope. The Washington Monument is a central piece of that geography. The thousands of people around the world who fly each year into Reagan National Airport are welcomed first by the Washington Monument, flying down the Potomac River. Those who drive in from Virginia across the 14th Street Bridge are welcomed by the monument. It is our silent sentinel standing guard over the nation's capital. And today, after years of impressive, collaborative, well-managed work and a truly generous gift from David Rubenstein, those visitors will be able to once again visit the top of the monument and survey with wonder our nation's capital and the vast country of the United States of America. Secretary of Interior, it's now my pleasure to introduce perhaps the only cabinet secretary capable of climbing to the top of the monument, at least by leaps and bounds, and has actually done so not only once but twice. Secretary of Interior Sally Jewell has ably guided the department and the Park Service as it approaches its centennial through tough times, including the government shutdown that closed parks and monuments across the country, and joyous times like the recent designation of Point Arena Stornetta National Monument, protecting some pristine and beautiful seaside for future generations to enjoy. Please join me in welcoming a leader for our parks and for our country, Interior Secretary Sally Jewell.
Thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to be here and a great pleasure to be standing underneath this incredible Washington Monument. You know, these kinds of repairs, doing it on time, on budget, doesn't happen very easily. It happens because of a lot of people working together as a team. And one critical person that we're going to hear from a little later is David Rubenstein. David likes to consider himself a patriotic philanthropist, and he stepped up and paid fully for half of the repairs of the Washington Monument, $7.5 million, which is incredible. Thank you, David. You know, we think of the National Mall as really the front yard of the United States of America. It's an opportunity that people to come to visit this great city, see the United States of America right here. They see the memorials to the people who have served in many, many wars. They see the Capitol. They see the Lincoln Memorial. They see the Jefferson Memorial, the FDR Memorial, and so many other opportunities to celebrate what this country has become. And I will say that it doesn't happen by itself. It happens because of collaborative public-private partnerships, and the Trust for the National Mall is an important part of that. It is a fundraising arm for the National Mall that brings private philanthropy together with public investment to make this place really special. So I want to just recognize Chip Ackridge, who's the chairman of the Trust for the National Mall, and Caroline Cunningham, who's the president of the Trust for the National Mall. Thank you so much for your support and for getting so many donors to support this place. And if you're a prospective donor out there, we welcome your contributions to help this as well. I'd also say that it has been a real pleasure for me to work with some incredible colleagues. You met Bob Vogel. You'll soon meet John Jarvis. You see many others around here in Park Service uniforms. These parks don't run themselves. They are supported by an incredible collection of public servants that work day in and day out to keep us safe, to interpret our history and culture for so many. And I just want to thank the employees of the National Park Service, but also the contractors who worked so hard alongside the National Park Service to deliver this monument back to us safely, structurally sound, on time, and on budget. So let's give them a quick round of applause. So there's a great sense of history here. You've got the Capitol, you've got the Lincoln Memorial, you've got this extraordinary monument towering above them all. So when ground was broken here in 1848, there were actually 4 present or future presidents in attendance at the groundbreaking, including an obscure congressman from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln. He was here for the groundbreaking. And in some ways, the monument itself reflects our journey as a nation. Its history has been a long road with unexpected detours. First authorized by Congress in 1783, it took 100 years to complete. At first, George Washington didn't want any taxpayer money spent on it. So private citizens, much like we've seen here today, not Congress, raised the money, led by Chief Justice John Marshall. But work stopped in the mid-1850s, and as the children pointed out, you can see different colored stones. It sat like that for more than 20 years as the Civil War broke out. And when it began, a group called the Know Nothing Party took over the project, but their position on immigrants and religion was so hateful that donations dried up. So shortly thereafter, the nation plunged into civil war, and it sat incomplete for 20 years. In 1876, Congress appropriated the money to complete it, and it took until 1883 with the 21st president, Chester Arthur, to finish the memorial to our first president. Over the course of time, the design of the monument changed. Designs of monuments are always controversial. The original concept, a Roman colonnade. The original designer of this monument, someone said it's going to look like a stalk of asparagus. Now look at it. I don't think they were right. Like our country itself, it ended up looking a lot different than some expected. Even the history of the elevator inside the monument tells a bit about how far we've come as a country. When it was first installed, it was thought to be too dangerous for women and children. So only men could take the elevator, and the women and children had to take the stairs. All 896 steps. Now, if you're into staying in shape, it's a great way to stay in shape. One of the opportunities I had with Mr. Rubenstein was to go up the outside of the scaffolding of the Washington Monument and look down on the top. And then just a week ago, a number of us, including Mr. Rubenstein, walked up all 896 steps to the top of the Washington Monument. It's a great way to see it. And as Bob Vogel will tell you, beginning in the summertime, there'll be special tours for people to walk down the stairs, hosted by Park Service folks to actually see the stones that are set on the inside of the monument. But the elevator does stop and give you a view of those on the way down. We look forward to taking a much quicker ride to the top today with wounded warriors who are visiting with us and their families who fought for our country and served and paid a very significant price. That same spirit and legacy of public-private partnership has won the day, and it's especially appropriate to the legacy of George Washington, a man who first and foremost viewed himself as a citizen and reluctantly left private life at Mount Vernon to serve his country as a soldier and as president. In today's audience, there are many individuals who are following in the footsteps of George Washington in service to our country. Teachers, soldiers, parents, public servants across many organizations, I applaud you for your commitment to our communities, large and small. You do it because you're driven by a sense of purpose, duty, or community. You do it because you want to make a difference. You do it because you recognize that America would not be the great country that it is if it weren't for ordinary citizens making extraordinary contributions. So today is about celebrating the reopening of the Washington Monument and the great partnerships and individuals that make this day possible. But to me, it's also about celebrating the everyday heroes who may not have a monument, but would make George Washington very proud of this country today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Secretary Jewell. The National Mall is, as you know, been heard, in fact, it was called the America's front yard. It's a place where presidents are inaugurated, free speech celebrated, where one is immersed in our culture and history. The National Mall, which is also a national park, is also one of the most recognizable landscapes in any part of the world. It hosts almost 30 million visitors annually. For some perspective, that's more visitors than Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, and Yellowstone National Parks combined. Our next speaker describes America's national park system as a gift from past generations to this and succeeding generations. And that's exactly how he treats the over 84 million acres of parkland that fall under his direction. Fortunately, he doesn't have to mow the lawn. His job is to preserve the nation's natural and cultural heritage through our national parks. Please join me in welcoming John Jarvis, the director of the National Park Service.
Thank you, Al, and thank you, Secretary. And thank you all for joining us here today. You know, last July, we gathered here to flip the switch and illuminate the Washington Monument scaffolding. There are 6,000 pieces to that and 488 lights that really, we wanted the monument to be beautiful even during repair. But we also wanted to send a message that it would reopen, and today that promise has come true. And as has been mentioned, and we'll do it over and over again, on time and within budget. For me, this is personal. I worked here as a ranger 38 years ago as a seasonal. And just like the Rangers today, I was eager to share this incredible symbol of Washington and the nation with the millions of visitors from around the country and around the world. You know, as a former ranger, I knew the details of the Washington Monument. I knew that it was a dry stacked stone structure. There really no mortar in those joints. And so when the earthquake hit, I would say, we may have some problems here. And I knew the restoration was going to be a challenge. The public has been extraordinarily interested in this project from the day one on every aspect of it. And early in the process, as has been mentioned, David Rubenstein contacted me with a very generous offer of $7.5 million to match the federal appropriation. And really that donation through our great partner, the Trust for the National Mall, not only provided this critical support, but it also was inspirational. This generosity is the way David gives back to the country. And as a result, it has inspired others to give back to the restoration of the National Mall through the Trust for the National Mall. We have a lot of work yet to be done on this extraordinary landscape, this front yard of America, and we invite all of your participation. Little you probably know that philanthropy has long been a history of the National Park Service. It even goes back to our first director, Stephen Mather, who really enlisted the railroads to promote the national park idea and build some of the original lodges. Some of our greatest national parks have been made possible through philanthropy. And of course, as mentioned, this monument itself was built with private funds, at least initially. The National Park Service will celebrate its 100th anniversary in 2016 and begin its second century of public engagement, stewardship, and service. Our congressionally chartered partner, the National Park Foundation, will begin a centennial campaign to reintroduce the national parks to a new generation of Americans, inviting them to visit, to get involved, to volunteer, and to find their park. We will build awareness, deepen connection, and grow support for America's national parks. Over our first 100 years, we have seen patriotic Americans support their national parks as a way to give back to their country. And today, parks such as Yosemite National Park has received grants of over $80 million from the Yosemite Conservancy. And then right here in the district, Glen Echo's signature carousel has been rebuilt through the very generous work of the Glen Echo Foundation. Repairing the Washington Monument was a huge task. Only ask one of the workers that were dangling up off the sides of this incredible structure, more than 500 feet above the nation's capital every day, and they did it accident-free. The magnitude of the work and the fact that we are standing here today tells you that the National Park Service takes very seriously its job of taking care of the places America loves, and we could not accomplish it without the support of generous Americans and the entire American people. More than 25 million visitors come here each year. It is one of the busiest places, busiest national parks in our country. And I want to thank all of our partners, particularly the National Trust, for helping us maintain America's front yard and working with us every day to make sure the visitor experience is the best that it can be. And finally, I'd like to welcome all of you back to the Washington Monument. I hope that it serves as a reminder to the public and their institutions that we can do powerful work, that civic involvement empowers us as citizens, and that the National Park Service will always be here to take care of this nation's special places.
I had the opportunity to meet Caroline Cunningham, president for the Trust for the National Mall, last week when I was here for my first look at the monument. Caroline was telling me how much the park is loved by so many visitors who come here, not just from this country, but all over the world. Not surprisingly, though, it takes a lot of work and a lot of money to keep the National Mall in shape. In an era of increasingly tight budgets, you might imagine it's already difficult, but then the earthquake of 2011 hit and it became dire. Trust for the National Mall is leading the effort to get more and more Americans to commit and contribute in any way they can to providing and making sure we preserve the future of the mall. Please join me in welcoming Caroline Cunningham.
Thank you, Al, and it's an honor to be here on this historic day celebrating a milestone in the turbulent and triumphant history of the Washington Monument. I want to thank you, Secretary Jewell, Director Jarvis, Superintendent Vogel, and our honored guests, members of Congress, and the mayor. It is my sincere thanks to the Coca-Cola Company for supporting today's event. You know, the Washington Monument is a beacon at the center of this magnificent National Mall. And as others have mentioned today, construction halted in 1854 because of political party divide, a lack of private funds, and because of a much larger divide in our country, the Civil War. A divided country, lack of funds, a reality not so different from today. After the Civil War, the country came together to complete this monument. Even in turbulent times, Americans from all backgrounds saw the Washington Monument and the park in which it resides as their own. Then, just like today, it was and is our common ground. In divided times, collective action can unite us. The voluntary contribution of time and money is a very American act, coming together to make a difference. And thousands have answered the Trust's call. The Trust for the National Mall is working to make this park more sustainable, more functional, and beautiful for generations to come. We are asking Americans to come together to be a part of history, to come together to restore key parts of the National Mall in time for the National Park Service 100th anniversary in 2016. Immediately after the earthquake, the first gift came from a Texas woman who called the Trust for the National Mall to offer money she had collected from family and friends. She is a descendant of one of the senators, a Confederate soldier, who jump-started congressional appropriations to complete the monument after the Civil War. The largest donation to restore the earthquake-damaged monument, as you know, came from a single contribution from David Rubenstein. David, who serves as a co-chair of the Trust's campaign for the National Mall, contributed $7.5 million to match government funding, for which we are grateful to Congress. It's an historic, generous, heroic act of what David calls patriotic philanthropy, and I could not agree more. These two examples show that all of us can contribute in large and small ways to restore and protect the sacred spaces that house our shared history. They say that from the monument's observation deck, you can see 30 miles in each direction on a clear day. But if you look at the monument itself, you can see the coming together of an entire nation, its rich history, and its bright future. It is a true pleasure to introduce a man who has great respect for American history and the vision and generosity to protect it for future generations and all of us. Co-chair of the Campaign for the National Mall, ladies and gentlemen, a true patriot, David Rubenstein.
I want to thank Secretary Jewell for encouraging me to climb to the top of the monument. I actually had intended to take the elevator on both occasions, but she kind of challenged me a bit, and so I made it without a defibrillator, and I didn't think I would do it. So thank you for that challenge. I really just wanted to say two things. One, I only did what other Americans who have the good fortune that I have had would have done, presented with the same opportunity. Many Americans have had good fortune. I have had good fortune, and I really wanted to give back to the country, and this was just a down payment on my obligation to repay the country for what it has done for me and for my family. So I am very honored to be here. I hope to do other things that will help repay the debt I have to my country, and this is just a symbol of what I think other Americans can do. I hope other Americans will take up the banner and also begin to participate in what I'd like to call patriotic philanthropy. A second thing I'd like to say is that I didn't really know exactly what to say today, and then yesterday on my iPad a message came up, and I'd like to read it to you. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you today, but my present circumstances make that impossible. However, the wonders of the internet have made it possible for me to send this message. Since the monument was first opened, I have enjoyed watching it as it has stood proudly in our nation's mall. I've enjoyed this not because this is a monument to me, because it has become a symbol of freedom and a symbol of the values which have made this country so unique and so important. I appreciate the Park Service and its contractors getting this monument built on time and on budget, hopefully a precursor of the future for other federal projects. I hope all Americans and all lovers of freedom will take advantage of this opportunity to now revisit the monument, not because it is a monument to me, but because it is a symbol of what our country stands for. Faithfully yours, George Washington. Thank you.
Once again, another round of applause for David Rubenstein, please. We are grateful to your generosity. Thank you so much. As a congresswoman for the District of Columbia, you're serving her 12th term in office. Eleanor Holmes Norton was here on the 270th anniversary of George Washington's birth when the monument reopened in 2002 after renovations. The reopening that day very significant because it was 5 months after the September 11th attacks. American people still very much on edge. We all realized nothing would ever be the same again. She hailed the monument's reopening as a return to normalcy. And she was right. And how wonderful today we can once again return to normal, travel to the top of the magnificent monument. Please welcome Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Thank you, Al Roker. I guess you have given new meaning today to fair weather friend, but we welcome you to Washington. Secretary Jewell, Mayor Gray, Mr. Jarvis, distinguished officials, and honored speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, and kids who just can't wait for the speeches to be over so that you can get into the Washington Monument. Our towering, refurbished, repaired Washington Monument. We've been without it for almost 1,000 days now. I'm very grateful to have our Washington Monument back. I'm grateful to David Rubenstein, whose philanthropic philanthropy hastened today's reopening. I'm grateful to Chuck Ackridge and Caroline Kennedy and the Mall Trust, and to Superintendent Vogel and the National Park Service for the care that went into assuring that the repairs, down to the last stone that had to be replaced, met the highest standards of historic authenticity, due a monument of the ages. I'm grateful to the workers who performed acrobatic magnificence just to see where the cracks were, and to all the workers who worked on this repair. I'm grateful to whoever came up with the idea of lightening the scaffolding, especially for the millions who could not get inside, and for all who saw the lights as a signal that the Washington Monument is eternal and would be open soon. I have only one question. Is this thing earthquake-proof? More than a century and a half ago, earthquakes, an unknown phenomenon in this region, was not an anticipated hazard. Good thing, though, they might have been skeptical of building the tallest structure in Washington. Too late. It's done now. Resuscitated. Our Washington Monument is back. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Holmes. Well, our next speaker is D.C. Mayor Vincent Gray. He was actually on his way to the National Mall when that 5.8 earthquake hit. He was going to check out the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, which had just opened up, but Mother Nature got in the way. In her wake, leaving millions of dollars of damage to all sorts of government facilities, of course, closing the Washington Monument, one of the most popular tourist sites in Washington. Like all of us, Mr. Mayor has been looking forward to this for a while. So please welcome Washington's Mayor, Vincent Gray.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Al Roker, and thank you very much for this lovely weather today. You're absolutely right. I was on the mall when the earthquake hit, and the vehicle in which I was sitting started to shake, and I turned to the driver and said, "Man, can't we afford to get a tune-up on this car?" And, of course, that wasn't the problem. You know, as we begin and continue to feel absolutely honored about the reopening of the Washington Monument, I want to also add my congratulations to the students from Aiton School. These are young people who have come today. And for those of you who are out there, many of you have been to celebrations of this kind before, and while the memory will never fade completely, it will fade somewhat into the background. But for these young people, a number of whom are challenged to be able to get the kind of education that we know that they deserve, they are here today. And I want to salute them in their eloquence for having stood on this stage and demonstrated how they can represent the District of Columbia and the East End of the District of Columbia as well. How about another big hand for our students from Aiton? It's also great to be here to represent our 647,000 residents, as well as the millions of visitors to the District of Columbia each year, to have, once again, one of our most iconic structures reopened to the public. This monument, which of course is a symbol of the nation's capital and of our country, now again stands as it once was, and that is open, free, to the public to be able to enjoy. Visitors will soon be able to scale this great memorial and survey our city from the Potomac to the Anacostia, gazing upon our neighbors in Virginia and Maryland. Iconic federal sites like the White House, the National Mall, Arlington National Cemetery, and the U.S. Capitol, as well as the great neighborhoods that make up the District of Columbia. You know, on an almost daily basis, I rode past the Washington Monument, watching the work take place. And I watched those folks who were dangling from those wires high up in the air, making those repairs. And there was more than once when I thought, thank you very much, better you than me. There is no way that I will be up there doing that. I want to thank also Secretary Jewell, Director Jarvis, Bob Vogel, Caroline Cunningham, along with everyone at the Department of the Interior for making this happen and making it happen as quickly as possibly could be done. The National Park Service, the Trust for the National Mall for the hard work that they have demonstrated as well in restoring and reopening this absolute national treasure. I also want to thank our Congresswoman for the work that she invested in this on the Hill to be able to make this happen. And, of course, this is a part of your district, right, Congresswoman Norton? And we're proud that you represent all the people of the District of Columbia as well. And I also want to join the others in thanking David Rubenstein. His philanthropy is lower on this project, as well as so many others across the District of Columbia. And I want to congratulate him on doing something that none of us have been able to do, and that is to make direct contact with President George Washington, as he demonstrated in his comments. You know, the monument looked resplendent with the scaffolding that was lit up for so many months as the work was done. And while that was wonderful to be able to see, it's also great to be able to have the monument restored to its pre-earthquake condition and open for the public to enjoy. So again, how about a big hand for David Rubenstein and the work that he has done and the commitment he has made. Director Jarvis, I'd like to present you on behalf of the people of the District of Columbia a proclamation. And I'm not going to read all the words of it because nobody wants to hear all the words of it. But I do want to indicate that I am proud on behalf of our entire population of the District of Columbia to be able to declare, to be able to proclaim May 12, 2014 as reopening of the Washington Monument Day in Washington, D.C.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Gray. We're in for a treat now. And that's not to imply that this hasn't been a treat so far. So let me move on. Next up, one of the most talented new singers around. She broke onto the scene when she won American Idol last year. By the way, talk about stick-to-itiveness. She auditioned 3 times before she got on the show, and when she did, boy, did she make it count. Talk about determination and confidence. It's our pleasure to welcome to the stage Candice Glover.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountains, majesty above the fruited plains. America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned
It's all right, time for the moment we've all been waiting for. It is time to cut the ribbon. Yes. And the Washington Monument is now officially reopened. Thank you all for being here. It has been a fantastic morning. We want to thank all of our speakers, musicians, and students. Again, want to thank the wounded warriors and their families, and for all of you to help us reopen this grand old monument. Have a great day, everybody, and enjoy our and your Washington Monument. Thank you.